Received his nickname Mad Dog Mattis after leading U.S. troops during the 2004 Battle of Fallujah in Iraq. He enlisted in the Marines at 19, fought in the Persian Gulf War in Afghanistan and Iraq, where he served as Major General. In May 2004, Mattis ordered an airstrike in a small Iraqi village that hit a wedding, killing about 42 people who were attending the wedding ceremony. Mattis went on to lead the U.S. Central Command from 2010 to 2013, but the Obama administration cut short his tour over concerns General Mattis was too hawkish on Iran, reportedly calling for a series of covert actions there. Mattis has drawn criticism over his apparent celebration of killing, including saying in 2005 about the Taliban, quote, "It's a hell of a lot of fun to shoot them," unquote. For more, we go to Washington, D.C., where we're joined by Aaron Glantz, senior reporter for Reveal from the Center for Investigative Reporting. His latest investigation: did Defense Secretary nominee James Mattis commit war crimes in Iraq? If you could summarize, Aaron, again, your major findings in this piece that we will link to, where you are asking if the Defense Secretary nominee is responsible for, is guilty of, should be tried for war crimes.
It's a very important legal doctrine in the United States of America and around the world is the doctrine of command responsibility. If you have a large-scale atrocity that takes place, the commanding general of the operation is held responsible. We held General Yamashita, who was the commanding general in the Japanese army of a number of operations in the Philippines, under this standard back in World War II, and we executed him, and his execution was upheld by the Supreme Court. Legal scholars that I've talked to said the same standard applies to General Mattis, and so we have to look very closely at his command of the U.S. Marine Corps in Fallujah, which is an event that I covered in 2004 as an unembedded journalist. And in that battle, U.S. Marines under his command killed so many people, one UN estimate says 90% of them were civilians, that the municipal football stadium of the city had to be turned into a graveyard. Marines shot at ambulances, Marines shot at aid workers, Marines posed with trophy photos with the dead that they killed. All of these are things that Mattis could be tried for, potentially, for war crimes, and he is Donald Trump's nominee for Secretary of Defense. In addition, we also spoke about his role as the convening authority of trials for Marines in other cases, the Haditha massacre, the Hamdaniya massacre, where he wiped away or granted clemency to people who were already convicted, freeing them from prison for atrocities. And if a person in his kind of command responsibility allows others to get off the hook for war crimes, that's also something that he could be held culpable for, held accountable for. And, it would be my hope that in his confirmation hearing before the Senate Armed Services Committee and perhaps in follow-on hearings in the House, if they occur, regarding the waiver that he's going to need to get to become Secretary of Defense, that James Mattis be asked to explain himself regarding the actions that we've been discussing.
Well, is it the case that Mattis is still seen as a strong proponent of the Geneva Conventions and as an anti-torture advocate?
Absolutely. Absolutely. He has been very vocal in saying that he supports the Geneva Convention. He has been an advocate against torture. Donald Trump emerged from a meeting with him and began to back off his support for the practice of waterboarding after listening to General Mattis. But you also have to look at what happens when General Mattis is in the field. And what we saw in Fallujah and in other instances in Iraq is that when General Mattis is in the field, often he allows his Marines to go well beyond what is normally permitted in the law of war.
Explain what you mean.
Well, we've been talking about Fallujah. You mentioned a wedding party that was bombed on his call in western Iraq not long after that, where he later told a Marine historian, Bing West, that he deliberated less than 30 seconds over whether to carry it out, simply because it was in the middle of the desert. And then, the Associated Press later obtained footage that showed that there was indeed a wedding party where dozens of civilians were killed. Later, as James Mattis moved up the chain of command, was no longer a field commander in Iraq, he became a convening authority in a number of tribunals involving war crimes committed by Marines in the country, including the most famous massacre that occurred during the Iraq War, the Haditha massacre, where a number of Marines went on a killing spree in the town of Haditha after one of their comrades was killed. They killed dozens of people in a number of houses, and charges were brought. And as the general overseeing the entire court-martial process, General Mattis dismissed charges against 3 of the perpetrators, and ultimately no one charged with that massacre of dozens of Iraqis was spent a single day in prison.
Let's go back a few years to 2008. Democracy Now! Spoke with McClatchy journalist Layla Fadel, who traveled to Haditha to interview survivors of the massacre. I want to turn to a short video posted on the McClatchy website based on her reporting.
Yusuf Aiz Ahmed has memorized the places where his 4 brothers' bodies laid after they were killed by U.S. Marines, he said. The family recounts that November day in 2005 and says it was a massacre of the brothers along with 20 other people following a roadside bomb in Haditha. Marines raided the house and shot the unarmed men in their heads in this back bedroom, the family said. Now they are angry that no one is being held accountable. Charges against 6 of the 8 Marines accused in the case were dismissed, and 1 Marine was found not guilty on all charges.
I'm angry at those who send them innocent. They weren't supposed to be sent innocent. That's it.
The reminders of their deaths are everywhere. The white plaster that filled in the bullet holes in the wall, the dried blood that are now just faded gray spots under a new paint job on the ceiling, and the closet where one brother was shot inside and the other's corpse leaned up against the wardrobe.
I know that.
That's McClatchy journalist Layla Fadel. If you could take it from there, Aaron Glantz.
Well, I mean, maybe the first important thing to point out is that when that massacre happened in 2005, nobody on the ground reported it. And it wasn't until the story was broken sometime later by Time magazine that the Marine Corps even investigated what happened. Then, following the investigation, charges were brought against the Marine squad that committed the crimes that were described in the video. She mentioned that charges were dismissed against 6 of the accused. Mattis himself was responsible for 3 of those dismissals. Ultimately, only 1 person was convicted, who was the supposed ringleader of the operation, and he did not serve 1 day behind bars, although he did tell the court that he regretted telling the other Marines to shoot first and ask questions later.